Hindsight is 2020. Sometimes in the coffee world, we can learn things over the journey of our careers that would have maybe helped us if we had known them earlier. I deal with that all the time. I call them little coffee epiphanies, and they happen out of thin air sometimes, and sometimes they have prompt, and then sometimes people will give them to you as a treat. I'm gonna share with you guys 8 things that I wish I had known when I was first starting out. It would have made my life a lot easier. Before we go in, if you guys don't mind liking and subscribing, that really helps me out. 90% of you don't, so please do it. Okay, we're done there. That conversation has been had and you may enjoy the video. Number 1 is a coffee science thing. I wish when I was a baby barista that I had been told about washout kinetics and diffusion. Washout kinetics can essentially be thought of as a coffee shower. So your coffee bed, your espresso puck, whatever it is, has flavor in there. There's little coffee particles that get caught up in water and transported from the coffee into your cup and sometimes into a filter. Like coffee is taking a shower and it's washing off all the dirt, but the dirt is actually yum yum flavor that ends up in your cup. Now, diffusion is a bit different. Diffusion is when you take a substance in a concentrated state and it naturally dissipates into a less concentrated state. For example, if I took this candle and I blew it out, you can see there's a lot of smoke right here next to me, but we both know that if you went all the way to the back of that room, eventually you would smell the smoke. That's an example of diffusion. It's at a concentrated point right here. I can smell it. It's very, very pungent, but over the course of time, it is going to fill up the room. It'll be dissipated more and it'll be thinner, but it will find its way into every crevice of this concentrated or less concentrated room. And these two physics phenomenon happen in tandem when you're brewing coffee. I find this really helpful when you think about things like agitation to coffee or your flow rate and how the water hits the coffee bed. There's a really great book that talks about this further called The Physics of Filter Coffee by Jonathan Gagne. This is an amazing book and it kind of shocked the coffee world last year. I'll leave a link in the description if you guys want to check it out. It's a little bit heady, so it goes pretty deep into the science territory, but it's really, really cool. The next one you might have heard of, it's pretty common knowledge nowadays, but when I was starting out in coffee, nobody was really talking about channeling to me, even though that is one of the biggest culprits of bad espresso and bad pour overs. But channeling is so common in coffee, it's enemy number 1. And essentially all it is when water finds a path of least resistance in your coffee bed or your coffee puck. And let's say we have an espresso puck, for example, and we have a crack in our puck. Well, the water is going to find that crack and it's going to take a lot of the coffee solubles from in that crack. Oh, I hate saying that word. And it's going to take less of the coffee solubles from around it. Just like we were talking about with washout kinetics, if the water can't get to the coffee, it's not going to be able to take the coffee flavor with it. So what'll happen is you'll have under-extracted coffee in the areas that don't get as much contact with water, and you'll have over-extracted coffee in the areas that have either a hole or a crack in your espresso puck. Channeling is very common during espresso preparation. It's funny that in coffee, and it's something that took forever for me to learn as well, is that sometimes less is more, which leads me into number 3, distribution. I went so many years trying out so many different types of distributing my espresso, and it turns out the easiest thing to do is usually the best. It's so funny with things like distribution that we created all these different techniques of sliding our fingers, or we create OCD tools and all these different approaches just to get good distribution, when it turns out that a simple palm tap on your portafilter is actually one of the most efficient ways to extract coffee and to level that coffee bed. 2 ways that I would recommend to you distribute your coffee. If you're at a cafe, I think you should just naturally palm tap your coffee. Remember, coffee is as delicate as a newborn baby, so we want to give it a few little taps, just like you would when you're burping a newborn baby, and maybe a few karate chops, just like you would when you're karate chopping your newborn baby. And that's it. That's all you have to do. At this point, less is more, but you'll have much more consistent coffee. It's going to taste way better. You're going to be very happy. The other common way of distributing is a WDT, which stands for Weiss Distribution Tool. You've probably seen this around there, very popular right now. I have one from J. Kim Makes. He also has a YouTube, so I will link him in the descriptor if you want to go check his YouTube out. Essentially all this is acupuncture needles that are being held together on a piece of plastic. Using this on your coffee bed will help break up clumps. It'll also help distribute your coffee very evenly. If you have a coffee lover in your life and they don't have one of these, this is a great buy. This one, for instance, was only $1 because it was 3D printed. Again, J. Kim Makes, super awesome. link in the description. I would only recommend WDT tools for your home. So if you're making home espresso, great tool. As far as using this in a cafe setting, you could, but it's not very conducive of a good bar flow. So I would avoid it altogether unless you were making some really weird light roast coffee that you only make one of a day for yourself. Take your WDT in that case. You can do whatever you want. I don't really care. I wish I had known about palm tapping and WDT when I was first starting out. It would have saved me a lot of grief and a lot of bad espresso taste. Okay, so the next one is actually gonna be super easy, simple, how to fold your rags. So I'm a big believer in a tri-fold, and here's why. Say you take a rag like this and you fold it in a third, right? And then you fold it again in another third. And now we have this rectangle of a towel. But what I like to do is I like to go another third and then another third. And why this is so helpful is think about it. When we are using this on bar, we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then again, when we unfold it, we can fold it a bunch of different ways. This is basically an 18-sided die for a bar towel. And you have all these clean surfaces that don't have to get dirty. You could use this towel many, many times throughout the day. Folding your towels 3 by 3, try it. I swear it's the best. It'll change your life. I've also seen people do towel burritos where they will tuck the towel back into itself like this, and it creates kind of a burrito. It also looks like those toys we had when we were kids that would always fall out of your hand and were a little too sexual. That's a tangent for another day. I like burrito towels. I have no quarrel with burrito towels. I just find them a little bit hard to unfold in the moment, rather where if you had just a tri-folded towel, you could just whoop-ah and switch it back up. Old coffee is not bad, sort of. Most coffee bags say something like, this coffee will go bad in a month or 2 weeks. But in general, coffee can last way, way longer. As long as it's unopened or in an airtight container, it can go on for quite a while. Now, if you were to open your coffee bag and you left it open to the air, yeah, your coffee is gonna go bad. It's going to naturally oxidize, and all of the carbon dioxide that's trapped inside those coffee beans are going to expel, and it's just not gonna be as effervescent and vibrant and crisp as it would have been if you had that carbon dioxide in the beans. So don't leave your coffee bags open. In a best case scenario, you would be storing your coffee in a cool, dry place in an airtight container with very little headroom of air that's already in it. If, for instance, your coffee bag has a seal on it that you can reseal, that's amazing. And your coffee bag is already really well equipped to hold your coffee for you. So put it back in your bag if you're not using all of it, close up your bag, make it airtight, and close that seal. And you should be good. Another alternative is you can freeze coffee. If you want to. You could freeze an entire unopened bag, but then whenever you take it back out of the freezer, you don't want to open it until it's thawed unless you're going to use it right away. The reason being is condensation. If you open it and it touches the air, it's going to start to condensate and get wet all on those little coffee beans, and that's not very good. So best practices, and again mentioned in that book from Jonathan Gagne, is to single dose your coffee. Say, for instance, if you want a V60 in a year of this really special coffee you have, well, get a little tube and put that dose of the coffee in your freezer. And in an ideal world, it would have very little headroom. That way, your coffee isn't exposed to any air whatsoever. And then it'll practically last forever. So don't throw away your coffee just because you think it might be old. If it doesn't taste good, do whatever you want, but at the end of the day, you might be able to find another use for it. If you want to know how to taste coffee better, well, then you need to start drinking more coffee. And essentially, that's the trick to it. When I first started out, I was so baffled. How am I supposed to dial in an espresso if I don't know what an espresso is supposed to taste like? But it's helpful to have some frame of reference. So the best thing I could give you for advice would be to go to as many cafes as you can and try a broad range of espressos or filter coffee if that's your jam. Believe me, you're going to have a whole new perception of how coffee can taste, and you're probably going to taste a lot of bad coffee too. But that is a rite of passage that you have to earn. There are no shortcuts. If I had known about coffee density when I first started in coffee, I would have been much better at dialing in. So for all of you who make espresso, you might see one of these. You'll see a portafilter. Now, coffee dose is usually in relation to the basket in your portafilter. You'll see a lot of people do 18-gram doses. And that's because a lot of baskets in North America are sized for 18 grams. So let's say, for example, I got that dose right. It was an 18-gram basket, and I was saying, okay, I'm going to use 18 grams. Well, because of density, not all coffees are equal. Different densities are for many different things. For instance, it can be the altitude the coffee was grown in. It can be the variety of coffee itself. It can be how much it was roasted. Darker roasts are naturally less dense than lighter roasts. So what can happen is you can have a basket that's sized for 18, and you can have 18 grams of 2 different coffees in here, and there'll be different sizes in the basket depending on different densities. 18 grams of a dark roast in this basket might end up being way too much coffee. And so now we're working with different recipes, and make sure that you're not overfilling your basket or alternatively underfilling your basket, perhaps with a very dense or lightly roasted coffee. You want it to fill the basket, but you don't want it to be to the tip top of the basket. If it's too full, what you'll see is that when you lock it into your portafilter when the coffee's dry, there is an indent from the screw that is holding the screen in place on your espresso machine. If that indent is there, then use a little bit less coffee, because that's not going to give you an even flow of water through your coffee bed, and like we were saying before, your coffee will channel. Do not use a wet puck as reference for that, because as a wet puck gets wet, it expands and it will eventually press into that screw, maybe, but sometimes they do. And that's not always a good way to indicate whether or not you have too much coffee. Because they do a lot of latte art in this channel, we had to sneak one latte art tip in there, and that is to pour slowly. If I had known this in the beginning, I would have been much better, much sooner. But when I first started in latte art, I was just dumping my milk into my cup. And really what you want to do is the exact opposite. I like to describe milk flow in 3 ways: pencils or pens, Sharpies, or markers. And you can visualize this very well. The flow rate coming out of your pitcher is either as wide as a Sharpie, as wide as a marker, or as wide as a pencil. When you're pouring latte art, a lot of the time you're going to live between that pencil width and that Sharpie width. And very, very rarely are you ever going to be pouring as heavy as an Expo marker or something like that. Okay, the last one, you made it this far. Flavor notes are a lie. I'm challenging you, all of you people who love and swear by flavor notes. There's a really great photographer and coffee brewer over on Instagram named Alexander Mills, and he is always talking about how you should not say this tastes like, you should say this reminds me of. And oh my gosh, I can get behind that so hard. When you think about it, unless you were me, you're not going to experience the same taste I'm going to experience for many different reasons. I could have different references of taste. Perhaps you say something tastes like a plum, but I've never had a plum. So how am I supposed to know it tastes like a plum or not? And the reason this is important is because a lot of the time baby baristas will see flavor notes on a bag. They'll say, oh, it tastes like vanilla, chocolate, and root beer. Well, this coffee doesn't taste like vanilla, chocolate, or root beer. So something must be wrong with me. And no, the opposite is true. Nothing is wrong with you. The perception of coffee in our industry is what is wrong. We're using these words to describe coffee to others, to give them an idea of what we experience when we taste it. Not to say that every coffee is going to taste exactly like the flavors on the bag. Let's say you see a coffee bag and it says lemon on the coffee bag. Well, no, your coffee's not going to taste just like lemons. I mean, it might, but it's not always going to taste just like lemons. It might be describing a brighter acidity. All that being said, there are compounds and molecules that create similar flavors to other things because they are molecularly similar. Doesn't mean it's going to taste exactly like it. Sometimes it does. But generally speaking, these flavors are simply used to help us understand coffee better, to describe them to one another in an efficient way. So if you're a baby barista, don't get too hung up on flavor notes. Alrighty, baby baristas and friends and pals alike, that was however many tips I said I did. I think I did more than I was supposed to. Ways to help you in your coffee journey, coffee epiphanies. If you found this helpful, please like, subscribe, give me some love in the comments. I love you guys so much. You filthy, filthy, dirty scumbags. See you next time.